On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks pick up a very nice home victory over the Indiana Pacers on this Thursday evening. We'll break down how it happened, why it happened, and what it tells us about the future, and we'll get into all of that right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1925 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you late into the night here on a Thursday evening into Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer at FanDuel, you get $150 in bonus bets when it comes to your first $5 bet winning at FanDuel. Check it out there at FanDuel.com. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make it your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcasts. That includes Apple and Spotify. That also includes YouTube. On the video side, please like this video as you're watching it, and do us a favor and tell your friends and family and colleagues, all that fun stuff. Share the podcast with them, and it would definitely be appreciated by us. Today's show, we'll be diving into what became a very nice win for the Hawks, 124-118 at home over the Pacers. If you are watching on YouTube, you can see that I am not in my home studio. I am traveling. There'll be some logistical challenges over the weekend, but I wanted to make sure I got a podcast to you on this Thursday into Friday for your commutes on Friday, all that fun stuff, and we'll dive in full to the game. If you are a new listener, what we kind of do here on the show is go a little bit broader early in the podcast to kind of get a little bit more granular, a little bit more detail in the middle of the show. And then at the end of the show, we'll be diving into these post-game episodes. We'll get into kind of how all individuals played for the Hawks in this game, some highs, some lows, etc. But again, a really encouraging victory. This snaps a 5-game losing streak to the Pacers. The Hawks have not beaten the Pacers in like 2 years, basically. I did a show in crossover fashion on Wednesday evening with Tony East, the host of the Locked On Pacers podcast, and shared some Grizzlies stats for the Hawks against Indiana. They've been struggling against them mightily recently. Also, the Hawks' second win in the last 3 games. They had a very nice road win on Monday in Memphis as well. And a crazy stat here to kind of give you the context of the Hawks having a pretty tough schedule run right now. The Hawks have only been favored twice, and that includes tonight, in about a month, as far as the betting market is concerned. And again, that's not gospel, but it tells you that they're playing some pretty tough games. Also, this was their 10th consecutive game against a currently projected playoff team. 10 in a row. That's a pretty tough slate for Atlanta, but they've navigated it reasonably well, even without Jalen Johnson. In this game, the Hawks were down by as many as 13 points in this one. They trailed by 8 going into the fourth quarter, so it was never easy. They had really an awesome fourth quarter. It was 38-24. That speaks for itself, but they closed very well in this game, and that was enough to get the victory. And also, by the way, it's probably not time for this like granular sweating of this on March 6th, but the Hawks did pass the Orlando Magic in the standings tonight. Orlando's lost 5 games in a row. So if you are sweating that right now as to Hawks getting up into the battle for the 7 and 8 seed versus being the 9 seed or maybe even the 10 seed, it was a good night for that as well. So lots of good vibes heading into the weekend for Atlanta. As far as how it happened and kind of why it happened, this ended up being a very, very, very good offensive performance for the Hawks without actually a lot of hot shooting from 3. And that usually means you played well. There are some games in the NBA where if you make enough threes, you could overcome a lot, honestly, on offense and on defense, quite honestly. But in this game, the Hawks did not shoot well from 3, and they still managed to put up a 124 offensive rating in the game. So 1.24 points per possession. That's a very, very good number, no matter the context. And by the way, it was well over 130 after the first quarter. Hawks had a rough start in this game, as we'll talk about later on, with 21 points. They were really lights out offensively from that point forward. And I mentioned before already, they didn't shoot well in this game. They did actually have good shooting numbers. 61% true shooting is very good, but the Hawks were only 10 of 30 from 3, which is not like horrible by any means, but not a good 3-point shooting game by any description, either in volume or in accuracy. But the Hawks shot 63% on 2s. That's an excellent figure. They had 74 points in the paint, and that was probably the single biggest number in this game. They were able to get to the rim and, crucially, finish. The Hawks have had some really weird finishing issues up and down the roster the last couple of weeks, and tonight, no such issues, and that kind of was big to leading them to victory. I mentioned the 10 of 30 from 3. They were even worse than that early on. There were 6 of 22 from 3 through 3 quarters. But then they made 4 of their 8 attempts in the fourth quarter to make it a little bit more palatable. And look, it's not rocket science sometimes. The Hawks' best offensive quarter was the fourth. That was the one time the Hawks actually made threes. Now, that's not exactly the entire reason, but it does help when you make your threes. And that definitely happened down the stretch of this game, in particular, Georges Niang with a couple of those in the fourth. Also made their free throws late, which has been a bugaboo for the Hawks recently. They only ended up making 14 in the game, but they made almost all of them when it mattered in crunch time to kind of not give the game away late. And here's another key number: only 9 turnovers offensively for the Hawks in this game. That is an excellent figure against anyone, especially when only 5 of them are live ball. So the Hawks did a great job taking care of the ball. The Pacers could not get out and run as a result. It was actually a much slower paced game than many would expect when the Hawks Pacers play. Last year, they played some crazy up-tempo games. Tonight, not so much. Now, part of that was that the Pacers were without Tyrese Haliburton, which does matter in all of this stuff, but they played a little bit differently, but it was certainly something the Hawks kind of not turning the ball over is big to not let Indiana run, and that was the case in this one. And lastly, they won the glass overall, and they had real balance on offense. As we're getting to later on, I thought Trae Young was sneakily really, really, really good in this game, despite not having a huge scoring night, but 16 assists speaks for itself, 1 turnover. Also, big games from Georges Niang off the bench. Big game from Okongwu, I thought, in this one. Dyson was really good, as he almost always is, honestly. So really good stuff across the board. Very few guys played poorly, and that definitely is a nice thing to see at home. So, look, it was definitely an offense first win for the Hawks, if we're just being honest about it. But they did enough on defense to kind of sneak away with this one. And speaking of that, they had a 119 defensive rating. That's not great, but they did a very, very good job in the fourth quarter, which is winning time, all those things. They held the Pacers to less than 1 point per possession in the fourth quarter, on the way to 24 points. That is enough to close the door. And they really didn't have any total disasters defensively in this one. The only lineups that were what I would describe as untenably bad defensively were the Capella and Niang groups together, which has been a problem for a while now. And I will go as far as to say, probably later in the podcast, I would just not play those guys together at all anymore. That's probably where I would be at this point. But aside from that, it wasn't great. Again, it wasn't great defensively at all. But there were some wrinkles that the Hawks did well into kind of adjust to that. They stopped playing Capella and Niang in the fourth quarter together. That made sense. They went actually to a different lineup that I don't necessarily love with Capella and Gay, but it actually worked defensively. And also, they had 28 more points in the paint than Indiana, and the Pacers only had 14 threes. So that combination was pretty strong for the Hawks in this game, and they did enough to win. So again, it wasn't a perfect game by any means. The Hawks, again, were actually favored in this one very slightly. They were 1.5 point favorites at FanDuel. I saw some reactions post-game well, of course they won with no Haliburton. Well, obviously it helps to not face Haliburton. No one is saying otherwise. But the Hawks were not massive favorites in this game. They were 1.5 point favorites. The Pacers are good this year. And also, I won't dive into this because it's not a Pacers podcast, but if you look at the numbers of the Pacers, they don't fall off a cliff without Haliburton. They're worse without him, to be very clear, but they have 2 really, in fact, they're probably the only team in the league that has 3 high-level point guards on the same roster. They have Andrew Nembhard and TJ McConnell, and if there's ever a team to navigate playing without their star, it might be the Pacers in some respects. Again, he makes them better, but it wasn't like they were just hopeless without him. So keeping that in mind, it is a good win. I mean, there's obviously people are going to say otherwise because Haliburton was out. I get it, but you still have to win the game. And again, the Hawks were not massive favorites. So all that to say, a good night for Atlanta. 2 wins in the last 3 games. Very, very strong. If you simulated those 3 games and just said, all right, what would be a good result? 2 wins would be really, really good. And yeah, I kind of joked with it a little bit yesterday on the show with Tony East about how I would certainly have projected the most likely outcome for the back-to-back set with Indiana, as these teams play again, by the way, on Saturday, at 1-1 on both sides. But if you win the first one, it becomes time to get greedy. You don't want to settle for one, obviously, if you're the Hawks. You're at home again on Saturday. Very winnable game again there. We'll see if Haliburton plays. But at the very least, you can't win them both until you win the first one, and the Hawks won the first one on Thursday. All right, we'll get into more of the granular observations, plus my takeaways and the individual player evaluations in this spot. All that's coming up in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by Prizepicks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get on the action than with Prizepicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prizepicks, you just pick more or you pick less on at least 2 player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. It is easy to use, available in more than 30 states, including Georgia, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. This week, I'm looking at the board each and every day when it comes to the NBA, college basketball, NHL, soccer, MMA, and much more. Plus, they have NASCAR, they have golf, they have baseball, which is starting up in earnest right now, football, of course, and every sport that you want across the board. Prizepicks, they also make it very simple for you there, and also set your lineups in 60 seconds or less and stay engaged all game long or all season long as well. And when you win, your money hits the account in just as little as 15 minutes with no waiting around at all. Also, every Tuesday, they have Prizepicks discounts in terms of player projections up to 25%, giving even more value to your lineup. You can download the app right now today at Prizepicks and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $50 instantly after your first play of a $5 lineup. That is code LOCKEDONNBA, $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at Prizepicks. Prizepicks, run your game. All right, we'll dive in now to how this game unfolded, and the Hawks actually stuck with the same starting lineup in this game. Mo Gay started. I think it was like the 9 of the last 10 he started. That was at least a question coming into the night, what they were going to do there. They stuck with their guns. It was basically the same exact rotation that they've been playing for a while. The starters with Gay starting plus Capella as the smallest guy minutes-wise, which makes sense. LeVert, Mann, and Niang. That was a very kind of normal rotation for the Hawks in this game. No deeper than that. They did actually give up a 7-0 run mid-quarter in the first quarter. They had a 6-possession run when they didn't score any points mid-quarter, which was tough. I thought defensively they were actually like okay for the most part in the first quarter, but the offense was really, really flatlining. They scored 21 points on 23 possessions in the first quarter. They did well to take care of the ball as they did the entire game. They just couldn't make a shot in the first quarter, and they were down by 10 despite the fact the defense was actually okay in that opening period. In a second, they did actually get it going right away. Actually, they had 13 points in like 2.5 minutes. They had 3 threes in a row, which was very helpful. By the way, they had 6 threes in the first 3 quarters. 3 of them came in like a 2-minute span in the second quarter. I believe Niang hit one. Ricochet might have hit one. They got a couple of second chance points from Capella and from Niang in that stretch as well, and that kind of forced a timeout. This is a very back and forth game. I know the Hawks were down at times, but they also were up at times. They were never up big at any point in this game, really the entire way. But this was a nip and tuck kind of game across the board. And that was a 12-0 run by the Hawks early in the second quarter. They did cool off from there, and then had a very, very, very rough ending to the first half in this game. They didn't score for like almost 3 minutes. They finally did score on the last possession. Niang hit a 3 in the corner, but then the Hawks allowed a buzzer beater to McConnell. It was a tough shot, to be fair, but there was not a lot of help there defensively. Dyson didn't stop the ball. Like, it was a collective flop at the end of the quarter, at the end of the half, I should say. And the Hawks went from being up by 4 with 2.5 minutes to go in the first half to being into halftime down by 7. So I think it was like a 14-3, something like that kind of run at the end of the quarter. Pretty rough, and defensively they just kind of lost the plot. They were not executing, they were not communicating. It was their worst stretch defensively of the game, I thought, at the end of the first half. It was teetering a little bit. They were down by 10 early in the third quarter, but then they rounded off a 9-0 run. Probably the best stretch of the game from Ricochet, who had a movement 3 and then a nice finish at the rim. He was not incredible, but certainly was solid enough in this game. That was a big stretch for him. It was pretty close. The Hawks had 2 kind of mini runs in that third quarter, but the Pacers also had separate instances where they actually hit consecutive threes at bad times for the Hawks. The second one of those was notable because the Hawks were actually up by 1 with the ball. Quinn won a challenge on an out-of-bounds call. They won the challenge, got the ball back, didn't score, and then the Pacers hit 3 consecutive threes, basically. A big swing away from the Hawks, and the bench got rocked there. I thought Mann and Capella in particular were really rough, plus the Capella and Niang minutes just didn't work at all in this game. They had like a 140 defensive rating. It was tough. They were down by 8. And I mentioned it at the time, even on social media, like it was because largely they just couldn't make a shot. They were 6 of 22 from 3, and they had, I think, 4 free throw attempts or free throw makes in the first 3 quarters. They just couldn't do anything there. But as I sort of teased out earlier, that flipped late in the game. They did make the threes in the fourth quarter. They did make their free throws in the fourth quarter, and that was very helpful. They did good work early in the fourth to kind of tie the game after they were down by 8 points. Notably, they started playing Capella and Gay together. Now, I've talked about this before. I don't believe they can score effectively with with Gay and Capella together. Just logically speaking, Gay is a below-average offensive player, as is Capella. A little bit clunky. Gay can shoot it a little bit, which helps. But the numbers, again, it was about 3 minutes, so I don't want to overreact to that. It was basically they made it a rock fight in the 3 minutes. The Hawks won them because they played great defense, but offensively, it was a little bit ugly. But I can certainly, and I think I am right now, going to make the argument that if you're going to play Capella, which the Hawks I think are still going to do for a while longer, we'll see. Capella and Niang just shouldn't play together anymore. It's that rough. The foot speed just not there. They're just too slow. Not enough reaction time, transition issues, all those things. Again, I don't think that they can score with Capella and Gay, but Capella is usually plays his best basketball when he's unlocked with someone at the 4 who can help him, a la Jalen Johnson. Gay is not Jalen Johnson, but athletically, he does unlock a little bit of what Clint could do as a communicator, as an organizer, rebounder, all those things. And that worked. Now, it's going to be ugly if you do that. And I'd recommend playing Trae with those guys, but I wouldn't mind seeing that a little bit more. And I think Quinn in the fourth quarter might have at least woken up to that a little bit and said, because look, Niang, obviously limited defensively, but is a very good offensive player. And if you have Okongwu on the court to open up your offense, you can play Niang a little bit more, a little bit more versatile, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that's a little bit of a rant, but I want to at least note that. The Hawks did lead for the first time in the fourth quarter on a Ricochet jump shot, and then Niang hit back-to-back threes, which were big shots, about like mid-quarter to go up by 5. The lead was never gone from that point forward for the Hawks. It was not comfortable, though. It was back to 3 with 3 minutes to go. A 3 by Dyson, actually, that made it 6 again after Trae got in the middle of the paint and kicked it out. Then they gave it right back. Kind of a botched defensive possession, but with like 2.5 to go on Nesmith, just left him wide open. That was just a breakdown by the Hawks at a bad time. But then they kind of kept scoring effectively, and I was tipped in by Okongwu. LeVert drew a charge. A couple of bad possessions offensively, but still, they got a little bit lucky, I will say. They're up by 5, and McConnell missed a wide open, and I'm not exaggerating, wide open 3 in the right corner. Now, I'll say this. McConnell's not a guy that you want to guard insanely hard. He's not a real shooter, to be honest. He does take them. He's shooting, I think, like 33% for the year, something like that. He's not a total non-shooter, but if you want to leave a guy open, that's the guy to leave in some respects. I will also say this. The Hawks were not, almost certainly, I'd be shocked. They were not trying to leave him open like that. He was that wide open. It was like kind of scary, but he missed it. And that ended up being a big swing in the game. Like I mentioned this before, when the Hawks have lost games in recent days, like they lost the game on Tuesday to Milwaukee. I thought that game came down to like 2 or 3 possessions of just like make or miss league stuff. That's a make or miss league shot. The Hawks might still have won the game if he makes that shot, but it becomes a lot more interesting. He didn't make it, and there you go. They took advantage of that. Niang scored. They should have been over at that point in time. The Hawks did, of course, get a stop, and then they turned the ball over. Dyson threw a very bad inbounds pass for whatever reason. But the Pacers decided to start fouling, and they didn't have to. It was probably the right decision, honestly. But to their credit, the Hawks just made their free throws. In fact, 4 of 4 from Okongwu, and he had been shooting poorly at the line. 59% at the line for him in the last 8 games for this, but he made all 4 big ones there. Trae made 2 of his, and they finally got a stop after all of that, and it was over from there. But the Hawks ended up shooting 10 of 11 from the line in the fourth quarter. Not a given. The Hawks have had some interesting free throw issues offensively and defensively in recent past, but that was big because if they miss one or miss both at any of those times, something it's a game again because they kept making them. It was the lead was staying at 7 versus being at 5 or 6, and it's not a small difference at that point in the game. So between that, making 4 threes in the fourth quarter, and just kind of taking care of business, playing good defense. It was a very impressive close to the game for the Hawks and a good spot for them, but they got out of there with a victory. It was not comfortable, but it didn't need to be. It's a win for the Hawks and good vibes heading into the rematch on Saturday. All right, we'll get into the individual player breakdowns in just a second, and we'll come back after this. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is getting started, and there's no better place to get on the action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can also place live bets throughout the game. So if you miss the tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter, etc., stay in the action with FanDuel. The live betting feature also gives you every moment of the game being exciting for you as well. If you're looking for a bigger payout as well, you can even combine the live bets together into a same-game parlay. Plus, they have offerings like over-unders, they have point spreads, money lines, player props, game props, futures, etc. And the app is really safe and secure at FanDuel as well. They cover the entire range of sports. That includes the NBA, college basketball, NFL, college football, MLB, WNBA, hockey, golf, tennis. They have soccer, of course, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so much more. Plus, the app is really easy to use at FanDuel. And when you win, you get paid instantly. And right now, if you're a new customer at FanDuel, get $150 in terms of dollars in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com to join up right now today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, we'll dive in now to the player-by-player evaluations in this game. A lot of good, I will say, for this Hawks team, unsurprisingly. The one guy who I thought did not play particularly well overall was Capella. He played the fewest minutes, which makes sense. I shared this thesis a little bit on Twitter this week already. After, by the way, I will plug this. My friends ATL on 29, all former guests of mine, all friends of mine, Kevin Chenard, Glenn Willis, Tyler Jones, did a podcast about this, at least in part, on Wednesday, about how Capella is very limiting, and he is. And that was, I thought that was mostly reasonable. I made fun of Tyler, who's on this podcast a lot. I love Tyler. I think he's a little bit hyperbolic on Capella sometimes, but that's part of the fun. But I will say, Capella is limiting for sure. But my thesis is, I think people have kind of just, because he was such a prominent part of the Hawks for so long, he's still being evaluated like he's a starter or like he's a prominent player, where he is very clear that he's their ninth man right now. He's playing the fewest minutes of all the rotation guys. And that's appropriate at this point. He's not playing very well. Don't get me wrong. He's not playing well, but like he's just a pretty normal backup center now. And when I say that, normal backup centers are in the NBA, the modern league, are very limited players. They're also fungible to where like you skip them sometimes. Like in a bad matchup, the Hawks should just be willing and able to skip Capella and just not play him in a game or in a half or whatever. That's the level he's currently playing at. And that's the level the Hawks should be treating him at. And yeah, he's making a lot of money this year, but that doesn't matter anymore. The deadline's passed. His contract's expiring at the end of the season. That no longer has any bearing at all. So there you go. He's still, like, I think, a reasonable backup center. I know Hawks fans will not agree with me on that. That's fine. He's not playing well right now. I think his baseline's higher than it's been the last couple of weeks. If I'm wrong about that, I'll adjust that as we go forward. But no matter what, he is limiting. But he also, 14 minutes, 6 points, 5 rebounds. Like, he didn't get them killed in this game. They were -5 in his minutes. They didn't play great. But it's not like a situation that it's worthy of meltdown, I don't think. But maybe I'll be wrong in the future. And again, I would not play him and Niang. If you separate the minutes, I won't do the whole thing now. I have the numbers. If you separate the minutes of the with Niang and without Niang for Capella, since he came back from the deadline hiatus, it's been respectable without Niang and disastrous with Niang. And that's not a coincidence, I don't think. It matches the eye test, we'll say. So I would separate those guys permanently. But after that, if it's not working after that, you go to Barlow. Like if at some point you pull the plug, I get that. I'm not there yet, but that's just my opinion. From there, everybody else, basically, other than maybe Mohamed Gay's offense, everything else is pretty good in this game. Karis LeVert had it come down. He was not bad, but he had been red hot previously. He was not in this game. 8 points on 11 shots, 4 assists, 2 rebounds. I thought he played good defense, and I also thought he pushed the ball well. Offensively, getting some pace for the Hawks offensively in this game, but just didn't shoot it well. He was probably due for one of those after the last couple games. Terrence Mann, 12 points. Actually was a second best on the team, +12 in the plus minus in this game. 4 of 5 on 4 or 5 on twos, 1 of 4 from 3. I don't think he was incredible, but made some key shots along the way, gave him good minutes. And Terrence Mann is like a very qualified 8th man. That's kind of what he's playing at right now. Georges Niang, big game for him. 24 points on 15 shots. He hit 4 threes, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. And yeah, he gave some of that back defensively. I don't think Niang is as bad as the caricature of him is defensively, but he is limited. So playing him some with the Okongwu, more with the Okongwu would be helpful, I think. Also having Ricochet on the court as much as possible. He's not playing enough for my liking still, but I thought Niang gave him a ton of minutes that were valuable in this game. I won't say it every podcast, but I feel like I am right now. The roller coaster with Niang and like perception matters. Like he just doesn't look great when he doesn't play well. And that leaves people being, I think he's underrated. That's kind of my statement right now at this point, at least by some Hawks fans. To the starters, Mohamed Gay, 4 points, 5 rebounds, 3 steals, and a block. So super active and playmaky defensively. That's the Mo Gay experience right now. He's a little bit overzealous, but offensively, he's just not very good right now. Like if he makes threes, it's helpful. He made 4 threes against Milwaukee, made him look better. He was 0-4 in this game, but I thought he was still playable, which is key. He also played more. If you notice that, he played 23 minutes in this game. I believe that's the second most he's played all year long. So he is getting more time consistently. Sorry, it was third most. If you, it's the 2 Milwaukee games were the top 2, but I guess this was kind of tied for second, along with the first Milwaukee game. But it was in the top 3 of Mo Gay minutes performances because they're leaning into him a little bit more defensively as a catch-all and just making him hopefully just playable on offense. Is where they are. Ricochet, 11 points, made all 3 of his threes, was only 1 of 6 on twos, 4 rebounds, 2 assists for Ricochet. Very solid game, +16, best on the team there. He wasn't dominant. He was just okay on offense, but I thought he played well defensively, made the right plays, good passer. The movement shooting was encouraging. He's been playing well. and I'll just leave it there for now. Okongwu was really good in this game. 20 points, 13 rebounds, 2 assists, steal, and a block. I did a whole segment on Okongwu earlier this week, I think it was, about his February being his best month of his career. I stand by that, and he's playing well right now. Obviously, he had a kind of a rough-ish game on Tuesday against Milwaukee, but he was awesome tonight. Just numbers across the board, efficiency, made his free throws, made all 7 of his 2-point attempts. Not a lot of usage offensively, other than a couple of nice passes, but just did his job. Anchored defensively, was good across the board. Dyson Daniels, 17 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, and a steal for Dyson. Only 1 steal in this game, but the record, his streak's still alive. But 7 of 11 on 2s, 1 of 1 from 3. I thought he was very effective. The non-Trae minutes did not go well, which kind of dragged Dyson's plus-minus down. The Hawks were +7 with Trae and -13 without him, and it's because they couldn't score. Once again, the story is the same there. They have like a 95 offensive rating with Trae off the floor. That's when they're asking Dyson to carry that load, so it's not his fault, just the reality of the situation. But I thought Dyson was good across the board in this game, even with the shaky plus-minus. And then Trae Young, I get sneaky good because, people notice when he has 40 points or whatever. I get that. But 22 points on 22 possessions. So it wasn't super efficient, but also was like 55, 56% true shooting. Like, that's not terrible. It's like league average-ish. And the most important thing was 16 assists. 16 assists. He was awesome as a playmaker. 1 turnover for Trae. And look, I have done the litigation play on this. I think Trae's turnovers are occasionally a problem, to be sure. He has nights where it's bad, but him being high on the list in turnovers is not like a problem. It's because he has the ball so much. But this is one of those games where, like, you can't even say that. Like 16 points, 16 assists, and 1 turnover, I should say, is awesome. Also made some plays defensively. Like, he wasn't great, but I think he made a couple of handsy plays, passing lanes, getting in the way, making the right rotations, scrambling out of switches, all that. +7 in the game was like a sneaky good game for Trae. So not as like absolute A plus stuff, but he was awesome, I thought, across the board. All right. Obviously a lot of positives in this game. The interesting thing is, of course, they play again on Saturday. So same spot, same arena, same teams. I mentioned this a little bit briefly, by the way, and I'll save this for the end of the show, but there will not be a show after the game on Saturday, unfortunately. But the intrigue is, okay, it may not be the same. If Halliburton plays or Mathurin plays or both, that changes some things. But I don't always like love the back-to-backs like this, but it's interesting for like an evaluation standpoint. What changes get made? What adjustments get made? My friend Glenn Willis will probably have a field day on this after being able to watch a game back and then also preview the next one. But obviously winnable. I think if it's the same 2 rosters, the Hawks will again be small favorites. If the Hawks are playing against Halliburton, we saw today, actually this morning, the Hawks were underdogs in the game before the Halliburton was ruled out. So we'll see, but very winnable. A chance to get back to 30 and 34 with a victory. We'll see, but an intriguing game. Now, again, I will not have a show on Saturday. I basically try to never, ever miss a game like on the day it happens on the show, but occasionally, maybe once a year, like if that, I have to have that happen, and it's happening this weekend. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, I am traveling, and the way that Saturday breaks, it's just I can't get to record. I can't watch the game in a timely enough fashion and then record in time. But I plan to have a show on Sunday evening, back when I'm in Atlanta. It won't be the full breakdown because it'll be a day later, but I'll have some thoughts on the game, as always, plus some other stuff. So stay tuned for that. My apologies. There will be a post-cast show. If you are an audio listener to the podcast already, you will know this, but if you don't know this, there is also usually a Hawks postcast. I'm not affiliated with that, but it's on the Locked On Hawks audio feed. It comes from Locked On Sports Atlanta. That's kind of an extra bonus if you're an audio listener, and you get that show in your feeds as well. So that should be there, I think, on Saturday night. But regardless, sort of give the PSA. Hopefully, if people still ask me questions, that's fine. But it's very rare that I do that, but it's really not avoidable at this point. Or I think I've probably shown over the years that I'm going to show up whenever I possibly can. But I cannot make the game on Saturday, so my apologies on that, and I'll make it up to you next week. So with all that said, please subscribe to this podcast. Enjoy your Friday, number one, but also please subscribe to the show on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow the also me on Blue Sky at BT Rowland, and follow my non-podcast work when it comes to writing, when it comes to extra audio stuff. All of that can be found at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody, enjoy this victory for the Hawks. Take it easy. Enjoy the Friday, and I will see you probably in a couple days. So stay tuned and subscribe and tell your friends about the podcast.